Hi guys, how are you all today morning? Good morning. Today is 15th December 2023. My name is TSV Raghavan and I live in Chennai, Tamil Nadu, India. This is my spiritual vlog on YouTube. HARDAN, 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 Haribol, TRSV, Nectar, NECTAR, Nectar. In this particular vlog, in all my previous videos, we have been trying to discuss and analyze the knowledge and information that we have gleaned through the study of spiritual books, scriptures, contemplation on the material universe, and meditation on the spiritual universe. This particular video in this vlog is no exception to that rule. In fact, it is a mere continuation of all that we have been trying to do in all my previous videos. Kindly subscribe to this blog and press the bell icon so that I may keep reminding you of all my previous, present, and future videos. So let us continue with the topic of discussion for today's video. In the past few videos, we have been trying to discuss and analyze in detail a very important term in the psyche and life of every human living entity, whether male or female, in a lifetime in this material world. This particular mind or this particular term is known as mind, which exists among the four layers of the material body of every human living entity. Mind is the subtle form of the gross form of a mass of tissue called brain in the gross body of every human living entity, whether male or female. Vibrations from the three subtle layers of material body, namely the causal body of intelligence, the astral body of mind, feelings, and emotions, and the etheric body of senses, namely five in numbers, that is, that sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch are transmitted initially to this subtle form of the gross body's brain, that is mind. Mind is the subtle form of the instrument that drives this chariot called the human living entity, whether male or female, and here those vibrations are initially deposited and stored. From them, the different types of vibrations from three different bodies or layers of body of the living entity are transmitted to his or her gross body's mass of tissue called brain. The brain selects some of these vibrations based on every individual living entity, whether male or female, and his or her destiny, karma, upbringing, atmosphere, surrounding, experience, maturity, cerebral faculty, age, whims, fantasies, tastes, and preference of that particular living entity. Thus, this selected part of vibrations is then processed by that brain in such a way that a resultant or residue juice is extracted out of these vibrations. Then this juice is percolated down the gross body of that particular living entity. This particular living entity reacts according to the quality of the juice so percolated down his or her gross body. This is a continuous and perpetual process that begins the moment this particular living entity decides to be born in a particular lifetime. That is 9 months before getting physically born into this terra firma. This process begins the moment this happens 9 months before birth, and it ends on the day and moment when this particular living entity, whether male or female, passes on into the space to be born again in another identity as a lifetime's human living entity of a particular birth. In other words, living human entities, whether male or female, don different gross bodies in every birth in this endless cycle of births and deaths in this terra firma. In other words, one living entity may be born as a mere cell, an algae, amoeba, shrubs, weeds, grasses, plants, creepers, trees, insects, worms, reptiles, amphibians, birds, bees, and ultimately as beasts and then human beings. There are 400,000 types of birth in the human species. After every lifetime, a particular human living entity, whether male or female, takes another birth in the human category, whether as a male or as a female, depending upon that particular person's prarabdha karma. Prarabdha karma is a slice of the sanchit karma of storage of karma through various lifetimes that is kept among the three subtle bodies of that particular human living entity, birth after birth and death after death. Depending upon this foundation called prarabdha karma, which is a slice of that unworked sanchit karma in the psyche of that living entity. This particular person leads his or her initial life in this lifetime before his or her free will or kriyamana karma takes over. When this person begins to act according to his or her kriyamana karma or free will, this free will may or may not be based on the prarabdha karma slice of the foundation of life for that particular living entity. This is one process that goes on and on in the case of every human living entity, birth after birth and death after death. To analyze this mind, which is the main instrument that drives this four layers of gross body of a human living entity, we have been discussing about various case histories. In that process, we are trying at present in my past few videos to discuss at length the actual process or happenings that resulted in the ultimate and unexpected total disappearance of one gentleman called Anthony Strollo, aka, that is also known as Tony Bender, who was ardently devoted to the worship of the dark negative forces of this material body and hence was an active member of the mafia of New York State of United States of America either in 1960 or in 1962. We are analyzing this particular event in detail. We came to the level where we found that two of the bosses of this crime family to which Tony Bender, our protagonist, belonged, were at loggerheads with each other. One of those bosses was known as Lucky Luciano, and the other was known as Vito Genovese. Vito Genovese was very much interested in narcotics smuggling and dealing, which is a taboo or was a taboo in the American law at that time, and if caught dealing drugs, that particular culprit was handed down very stiff prison sentences. To trap Vito Genovese, Lucky Luciano had a plan in which he included three major players with him who were known as Frank Costello, Meyer and Lansky, and Abner or Abe Longy Zulman. However, their first plan to trap Vito Genovese failed. Today we shall continue with that story. Once this plan failed, they began cooking up another plan B. Here they took the help of one young man known as Nelson Centillops. Nelson Centillops was a full-time drug smuggling courier hailing from the state of Puerto Rico in the United States. This guy had been once caught by the American authorities red-handed couriering drugs, and hence he was tried and sentenced to a very strong prison sentence and was whiling away or rotting away in his prison sentence in the notorious Sing Sing prison of New York State. It is quite possible that at that time Nelson Centilab was still an under trial. However, something about this is not very certain. The fact remains that underworld informers of the mafia informed Meyer Lansky and Frank Costello of the existence of this young man called Nelson Centillops in the Sing Sing prison. These guys contacted Lucky Luciano. Lucky Luciano asked them to go ahead with their plan B. Nelson Centillops was totally unaware of this mafia and the actual goings on in the United States, New York underworld. Frank Costello contacted Nelson Centillops. Here, Nelson Centillops wailed that his whole life would be lost rotting in an American prison. Frank Costello, who was politically very well connected, assured Nelson Centillops that he, Frank Costello, could arrange his bail provided Nelson Centillops played along with Frank Costello and did according to what he was told for a small cash gift. An eager Nelson Centillops agreed. Immediately, Frank Costello arranged for this Nelson Sentilov's unexpected bail from the Sing Sing prison in New York. Once this was done, both Frank Costello and Meyer Lansky, the other mobster, trained Nelson Sentilovs in such a way that he could be ready for Plan B. Nelson Setilovs had neither ever laid his eyes on Vito Genovese, nor was he aware of the existence of this mobster called Vito Genovese. However, the training for Nelson Sentilovs included a detailed diatribe where he had to claim in the court that he had acted according to the orders of Vito Genovese in one particular drug deal. Nelson Sentilovs by-hearted the whole incident told to him. Resultantly, Vito Genovese, along with his own associates in crime in his family, were once arrested by the American authorities and brought to trial. The star witness was none other than Nelson Sentilov. Nelson Sentilov successfully narrated his meetings with Vito Genovese, where he claimed that as per the orders of Vito Genovese, he had to deliver a very large consignment of narcotics to Vito Genovese at one particular spot on one particular cold New York night, in which at a particular time he successfully delivered that consignment to Vito Genovese. Nelson Sentilovs was very good in his act. He successfully succeeded and passed the detailed cross-examination by Vito Genovese's lawyer. The court and the judiciary had already been taken into consideration and probably bribed by Frank Costello. They chose to believe Nelson Sentilov's version of the whole story. Resultantly, Vito Genovese and his own tribe of ardent associates and followers were sentenced to a bum rap which amounted to a 15-year prison sentence to every individual in the Leavenworth Fort Penitentiary of New York or America. Vito Genovese knew right there and then that he had been royally framed by his own arch rival Lucky Luciano through his best friends Frank Costello and Meyer Lansky. Nelson Sentilov was only a friend. In this process, Frank Costello put an extra $5,000 into the kitty for this plan so that the person called Vincent the Chin Gigante who tried to shoot him in the year 1957 could be nailed straight to Vito Genovese. As a result of this, the whole group went to prison, and that included Vito Genovese, Vincent the Chin Gigante, Palermo, and Joseph Valachi, who was the first soldier from Cosa Nostra to spill the beans about the existence and its anarchy or its ladder in succession in the process of the American mafia underworld. He gave a detailed account of what happens in that mysterious organization. Anyway, the moment Vito Genovese landed in his prison, he began cooking up schemes to wreak complete vengeance on Lucky Luciano. He ignored Frank Costello and Meyer Lansky in that process. Abe Longy Zulman had already committed suicide. Nelson Sentilov was released from prison permanently by the judiciary thanks to his successful nailing of Vito Genovese, and he got a very big lump sum of payoff which he enjoyed for the next 6 years. However, one day he was tracked by Vito Genovese's friends and mysteriously stabbed to death in a pub brawl. Anyway, Vito Genovese was very much aware that all this could not have been possible without the connivance of someone who was close to him. The person who was his immediate right hand man was known as Tommy Eboli. Vito Genovese ordered Tommy Eboli to put his fine nose into the whole matter and smell out the rat. In this, Tommy Eboli was ably helped by other people from Mafia. We were discussing this case history in this particular video to find out how the mind of every human living entity works in a lifetime. We all know that these guys who are also living entities worshipped the dark negative forces of this material world, and as a result of this, every individual living entity's mind worked very differently. While that of Lucky Luciano, Frank Costello, and Meyer Lansky worked in the direction of nailing Vito Genovese, Vincent the Gigante, and the other associates. Vito's mind worked in the opposite direction, and how. We shall discuss about this in my next video. Kindly let me know what you think of my talk about this particular analysis and case history in this particular video. Please give me your own expert thoughts, opinions, views, and ideas so that I may blend everything together for the sake of this society. Before concluding, let me remind you that I am also a published author with Amazon Kindle and paperback. I write on spiritualism, fiction, and assorted subjects. Spiritualism happens to be my favorite subject. Till we meet in my next video, it is good morning from TSV Raghavan.